This is Market Pathways, your premium guide to global medical device regulation, reimbursement, and policy. Become a part of the global MedTech community at mystrategist.com.
Hi, welcome to the Market Pathways podcast. I'm David Fillmore, editor of Market Pathways, your source for MedTech regulatory, reimbursement, and market access policy coverage. Today on the podcast, I talked to Keely Scamperle. Keely is a veteran reimbursement and market access expert in the device industry. She's currently with J&J, but she's held positions in Orthofix, WL Gore, Apollo Ender's Surgery, and more. But today she talks to us in a different capacity as the founding board chair to the newly launched Reimbursement and Market Access Professional Society, or RAMPSociety for short. We talk about the growth of reimbursement and market access as a distinct profession over her career, and how she hopes the new group will help elevate its profile within medtech companies and the broader healthcare system, kind of similar to what a group like RAPS does in the regulatory arena. The new society will put a significant focus on credentialing, offering a new CRMA certification, and other community and knowledge building programs. So here's my chat with Keely. Hi, Keely. Welcome to the podcast. Nice to have you.
Nice to be here, David. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about, the reimbursement and market access profession, what it means to be in the field, and kind of your efforts really to support it. But you're obviously experienced in the space. You've worked in an array of device companies in this type of role. Let's start with you. Let's get a little bit of your background. Could you tell me, how did you get into this field, specific med tech, reimbursement, market access? What led you in this direction, just to kind of get that personal story?
Sure, I appreciate that. So whenever I'm asked this question, I always start off by remarking how incredibly lucky I've been in my career journey. I've had just a series of incredible mentors and leadership through a kind of unique and crazy journey through my career with lots of challenges and opportunities. And really, if it were not for those who allowed me to have autonomy, to make mistakes and partner along the learning journey, I really wouldn't have had near the successful career that I've had so far. So, I started out as a practice manager for surgeons. And my first career in the device space was with Orthofix. And my first role there was as appeal specialist. And they had a relatively low success hurdle for me to meet. And for whatever reason, I was pretty astute at it and exceeded that right away. And it was really kind of fun. It was really a great learning experience. And I even got to argue cases for administrative law judges. And then I noticed that our third-party administrator for the health plan for the organization didn't even cover our basic bread and butter device. So I decided to take that on. And at the end of the day, I was really lucky and able to create a national coverage policy, not only with that major payer, but for all the payers. And so I think that that's really where I began to understand the connection between reimbursement and market access and patients, because that opened up access to care to our technology to thousands and thousands of patients. So, so that was really neat. And then I also learned a lot of other stuff. And was able to engage in some unique things while I was at Orthofix. So my boss at the time started a small collaboration with one of our competitors to seek out the carve out of Class 3 medical devices under the Medicare Modernization Act. So that was the implementation of competitive bidding. And that's where I really learned that the power of small teams, because we were very small but very mighty, and we worked directly with the House Ways and Means Committee, and we're really successful in executing on that. So that was another unique opportunity. It was also about the time that the OIG issued compliance guidelines for the DMEPOS industry. And I brought it to the attention of our COO at the time, and he noticed that it required a compliance officer. So he said, "Well, I guess you're it." I'm like, "Okay, so here we go." So then I experienced that, went through some federal investigations. I, during that time, pursued my coding certifications, both through AAPC and AHIMA, and became certified as a healthcare compliance officer as well. So it was a pretty unique experience that really was the trajectory to my career.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I hear there is a lot of different, it's an expansive field in terms of the complex issues one could deal with. I mean, there's kind of some of that at the beginning was like a puzzle to address. Oh, we're not getting covered for this very specific device that my company has versus a bigger picture, national policy related to to coverage in terms of the legislative efforts, et cetera. So a lot of different directions there. What and I'm curious, like, is there a common? I mean, even just in terms of how you got to that first position, is there a common pathway here, common experience would you say, or is it very diverse in terms of, I mean, the industry itself is very diverse. Obviously, there's a lot of different issues one can pick up even within this realm. But how common is your particular experience, would you say, versus is there a particular path towards this type of
Sure.
career, or is it very varied?
Sure. So, when I talk to my peers and I notice, they're coming into the space, it's very diverse. That there is no direct, single pathway. They don't really teach courses in college, although they've gotten a little better, having some support that way. But we really come from all different backgrounds. Some start on the, regulatory side. Some start off as coders. Um, uh, some start off as health economists. Just it's a really diverse. Oh, some have their MBA. Or maybe their MPH. So it's pretty diverse, indirect pathway, and you do kind of learn along the way for sure.
Right. Not many people in their third grade class saying they're going to be kind of
No,
you do
I
evolve there.
I certainly didn't, sit there and say, what I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
also kind of laugh. So my youngest daughter has followed a sort of similar career path. She was taking some courses to get her MPH in college, and she called me up one day and said, "Mom, I think I understand what you do now."
yeah. It took that many years. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. She was in her 20s, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you walked through some interesting specific experiences you had in terms of, dealing with the reimbursement coding system, legislative process, et cetera. What on the challenges front? I mean, it's very those are all distinct and complex issues you talked about, and then have a lot of, bureaucracy related to them, et cetera. I wonder, curious, any particular like, oh, this would have been, where you ran into barriers maybe, or either specific personal experiences or broadly where, not having maybe the resources you needed to
Oh,
go through,
sure.
anything that comes to mind there.
Sure. I mean, gosh, all along the way, it has just been sort of stumbling into learning. And, the biggest hurdle of all was there not being a place to go to learn all of these things. No single source. I mean, you could, read rules, you could, listen to conferences and things like that, but really no place to go. So when I shifted, which was primarily a DemiPost focus at Orthofix, and shifted into focusing more on the implant side, I remember just searching everywhere. Where do I go to learn about the inpatient payment
Yeah,
system?
right. It's completely different context for, yeah,
Yeah, and there just wasn't anything, so it really was just a series of attending all those CMS open door meetings that they used to have where you could go in person and just kind of watch and see how the sausage was made. Really going through the process of maybe seeking payment for a device and just having to go through that process and going, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. And I don't think that'll ever change in this space. I think it's the uniqueness of reimbursement market access professionals is that we are on a daily learning journey. Um, I still get calls from my peers. I call them and, it's like, have you ever heard of, or how would you tackle this sort of thing? There's no end of the internet, uh,
Right. Yeah.
you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, it seems to speak to just like, the medical device industry. There's so many different facets of products that interact with the system in so many different ways. You could have a big imaging device or an implant or a test or a commodity supply, and you having to kind of the rubber hits the road when you kind of figure out how to get the reimbursement, with into the system. So there's so many
Sure.
different directions you can go there, it seems. Yeah.
Well, and this is one of the things we talk about, as a capability of our society and our education content is that sure, some of these things you can Google or you can, chat GPT, but they don't give you the sort of inside baseball strategic challenges that you're going to meet. And, that's one of the things that we really want to be as a source for okay, I understand how to fill out a coding change application, a CCA with the AMA for CPT code. The instructions are pretty clear. But what you don't get is all of the things that you're going to be facing, all of the different challenges, whether it be misalignment amongst the societies, whether it be I need to figure out how to get my executive team to engage with some of the decision makers on the society side. There's all kinds of things that you can't Google
Right.
to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. So great segue to, getting a little more into the specifics. So we're talking about obviously the Reimbursement and Market Access Professional Society, which you recently launched as a, chair and as sort of to help fill this gap. So, tell me a little bit about the origins of this and sort of when did the discussions start for, to get something like this up and running where this was needed.
Sure. So, I think it happened a long, long time ago where I think probably it dawned on me that there needed to be not only a source, but a credible platform for reimbursement market access professionals. I got to the point, going back to Orthofix, which transitioned into Right Medical. We had a COO that became CEO at Right Medical. And, through his listening and understanding, it got to the point where even through the M&A process, he would bring me a packet and say, hey, kiddo, take a look at this. He always called me kiddo. It was very sweet. Take a look at this. And I would do a landscape analysis and do a full report back. And then all of a sudden I was part of the due diligence team, right? So, I think that it was really, even back then, not only my mentor, boss at the time, but also peers that I was engaging with, really started to think, gosh, there needs to be a pathway. I mean, gosh, back then it was just law firms that were representing new tech at all of the CMS meetings and things like that,
Mm,
right? It
interesting.
wasn't, those professionals that have that holistic understanding embedded within organizations and having to navigate all of that. Um, and on top of the fact that, a reimbursement and market access professional really is unique in that they have to understand everything from M&A to R&D, to the regulatory. They have to understand clinical and sales and marketing, operations. I mean, the whole ball of wax. I mean, we're really not focused in one particular area. We have to be able to navigate that whole thing. So really, it was more than 10 years ago where a group of us really started saying, we need a society to provide that credibility externally, like many of our folks that we work with. The regulatory teams have a credentialing process, coders have a credentialing process, healthcare compliance professionals. So yeah, it's been a while. It's been cooking for a while.
Yeah, yeah, and you mentioned right the different other sort of segments. I mean, right, the first organization that occurred to me as like a seemed like maybe models like RAPS on the regulatory side, even even name, you're just adding an M there. But
Right.
I know that wasn't intentional, I'm sure, but
No, you
yeah,
did that.
I just yeah, are those organizations like RAPS or are maybe others in kind of present a model for how you're organized, and are there those kind of the vision of what you want to be is sort of that type of, basically consolidating force for some, identity of the standards for knowledge and an identity for the profession,
Yeah,
essentially.
absolutely. I mean, and I think that anyone that's been in a role similar to mine or tangential to it has seen sort of internal discussions in organizations around who owns the term market access, right? So, that was another, trigger towards, really creating definitions, guardrails, and a process for defining reimbursement and market access and who those professionals truly are.
Right, right. It's kind of it hasn't been as solid and defined as it should be, essentially. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Interesting. So key element of what you're doing and kind of the core it seems like is around the credentialing,
Mhm.
a credentialing program, essentially certification for this profession. So yeah, tell me a little bit about that, what that entails, what's the thinking behind what you're building there.
Sure. So when we were sort of noodling over, what does this thing look like? It seemed appropriate to start off with, well, let's start off with credentialing and having a certification program that establishes some baseline core competencies for a professional in this space. And and as I alluded, it's a big space, right? There's a lot of capabilities that a person has to be able to bring to the table. And really figuring out what those core competencies need to look like took a lot of thought and consideration and discussion around that. So what we landed on was a series of 14 modules that provide that basic holistic education and supports those what we see as the core competencies. So, for instance, we're not going to teach anyone to be a coder, but the program does give some basic coding structures across the ecosystem, what code sets apply where, how they interact, how they apply in the device trajectory through the reimbursement market access process. There's a series on how the codes integrate into the CMS new tech payment programs. We address how to make a case to your organization that you need to be on the front end, not on the back end of the process. We address basic regulatory pathways, understanding clinical evidence and the hierarchies of clinical evidence, how to collaborate with internal functions and align towards addressing RMA stakeholders, how to develop a value proposition for the key stakeholders. Organizations naturally focus on the end user clinician, right? But there's a lot of stakeholders in that ecosystem when you're bringing a device through into the marketplace. There's a session on rulemaking and how to interact in that process, proposed rules, final rules. We give some basic information about the three primary coding authorities, AMA, CMS, and the PDAC, and those inner workings. And of course, a session on compliance,
Hmm.
because that's really important as well. There's lots of information that a reimbursement market access professional needs to be aware of.
Right. So it sounds like a mix between some real technical knowledge stuff, but kind of practical, like you have to get ahead of this in front end instead of the, early, practical kind of guidance
Mhm.
about the process in addition to the technical.
Sure. And threaded throughout are strategic considerations, right? Because this type of professional has to be very strategic. They have to think about all the moving parts, all the different stakeholders, all the different ways in which developing clinical evidence input are really critical to the success, whether it be coding or pricing or coverage. So I think that that's one of the unique things about our learning focus is threading that strategic perspective throughout.
Hey, have you heard of Market Pathways? Market Pathways provides the most in-depth analysis you'll find of the changes happening in medical device regulation and reimbursement every day. They address the complexity in regulatory affairs and beyond by helping you digest and contextualize technical topics like Medicare and MDR. Visit mystrategist.com/trial today to start your free 5-day trial to Market Pathways. Again, that's mystrategist.com/trial for 5 days of online access.
Right, right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And there's also, I mean, you talked about the working with the other verticals,
Function.
and because that's a big, obviously a big conversation in medtech in general. Is, first of all, the focus on reimbursement, the hey,
Mhm.
you got to get to that earlier and all that. That's like the thing, everybody's been trying to say and say and say for the last 10 years, but also
Sure.
working with the regulatory side because, kind of earlier. So it sounds like that some of that sort of just basic um, you know, engaging on those different using strategy, but and then using it to work with the overall within the business and the overall goals.
Absolutely, absolutely. In this journey, a peer had said, in our profession, there's sort of two types. There's, those that are very specialized, like maybe they're really good at health economics, maybe they're really good at navigating CPT, and then there's generalists. And I think our focus is more in the generalist scope. I can tell you, I mean, things have sort of changed over time in this profession. We've seen the shift towards health economics, for instance. The past 15 years, we've seen HEMA teams, and that's really important, but it isn't market access. Health economics is a piece of that. More recently, we see organizations sort of snapping up all the CMS professionals that are
Mm,
exiting their
yeah,
government roles. Again, those are policy and process focused people, really important, in the ecosystem, but that's, still not that. I mean, gosh, I've met, HEMA teams and policy teams that have never done a landscape assessment, have never been in the field with their commercial teams to understand what they're facing every day, not interacted with C-suites at facilities, don't understand supply chain. I mean, these are all, I mean, it sounds crazy, but these are all capabilities that a strong reimbursement market access professional need to not only have, but need to be able to communicate and collaborate internally with their teams with.
right. And it's the idea. I mean, you one gets this credentialing. I mean, it's the knowledge, but also presumably it's a career builder, and the extent that there's some, the companies themselves recognize this as an important element of the
Absolutely.
resume. Is that,
Absolutely. I think, communicating that proficiency and that, you have those core competencies right from the start is really important. RMA professionals historically within the organization have to battle for that credibility. I'll be honest. I think we all know it. We've been in these roles. We have to fight for budget. We have to fight for resources. We have to, because I don't think it's unusual for an organization to really get the regulatory stuff. They understand FDA, they understand how critical it is, and there's no question. But FDA, that process is pretty well circumscribed. There's certain specific processes, certain timelines, certain, anticipated outcomes, or predictable outcomes, I should say. But trying to explain how that's not the same on the reimbursement and market access side to your functional partners internally and your executive team is a whole nother challenge. So we want to make sure that now those professionals have the ability to come to the table with this credential and say, no, I am a professional. I am certified and I have these core competencies. This is really important.
Right. So this is a big goal here is to kind of solidify the role and their ability to get sort of heard on the C-suite, et cetera, to have that sort of as a backing for that your organization, both the credential, but also just maybe the sense of the profession and the community created by having their own organization could help increase that buy-in in the corporate side of things.
Exactly, exactly. And really have that sort of structure around who and what is an RMA professional, you know? And again, we talked about how, we all sort of stumble into this role through different pathways, but having something that really has definition, I think only serves to elevate the profession in the healthcare ecosystem.
Hmm. And you mentioned obviously people coming from CMS into the industry there, but there's a lot of different stakeholders. I mean, there's
Yeah.
there's obviously CMS, there's private payers and all the different coding, it's not all, like AMA, et cetera. To what extent is there an engagement by your organization with those with those groups? Is the government, is that part of what you're do to like raise the profile of the profession in the eyes of these stakeholders as well, and sort of how do you look at that
Oh,
broader?
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, in our vision for the society, that's definitely a factor. In this early stage, as I mentioned, we wanted to start off first with, those definitions and that certification, that credibility and the credentials. But we will definitely, move into expanding into a really meaningful society that does advocate, engage, represent, innovate, all of those things for sure. I think that, we'll have a lot of different offerings, whether it's, opportunities to ask experts, to have maybe a podcast, and opportunity to hear from people that have been in the trenches. I think a lot of organizations offer many opportunities to hear from, say, CMS or a commercial payer or some other expert, and you listen and you take that information. But what we envision is something a little different where you kind of get that inside baseball information by talking and engaging with people who've been in the trenches, who've lived in that place of taking a technology through the process, all the bumps and bruises and successes and failures, a place where those learnings can happen. But then also, yes, to your point, um, elevate credibility with decision makers, and interacting with payers, whether it be public or private, with societies, with the specialty societies, with the AMA. I mean, all of these organizations have skin in the game, and we want to come to the table with equal footing, as other stakeholders do.
Right. So what should we be looking, I mean, it sounds like you have a long-term vision and, what should we be looking out for in the just, is this kind of, you just really, is this something that's just launched in
Right,
this past month or so? Is that right? Or timing wise?
right.
So, what's the next, year look like or, whatever periods make sense, in terms of building up the organization and, what should people in the industry be looking out for?
Sure. Well, I think initially, of course, it's getting the word out. It's that visibility that we're here, that we are established. Engaging professionals into the credentialing process, and creating that community, and then moving into offering, as I said, opportunities to engage with other professionals, really offering maybe some, 2 minutes with an expert, learnings, things I've learned over the years as a reimbursement market access professional, opportunities for members to, have live sessions, live learning sessions, and some podcasts. I think that will probably be the next phase that we move into, is sort of a library of interactive opportunities to bring members in. And then we'll move into the next phase of really focusing on how do we interact with external stakeholders that we mentioned.
Great. So where should people look out for you? I mean, where's the best place to find you and look for this stuff and join if the for the ramp professionals listening?
Sure. So you can find us on our website at rampsociety.com. We're also on LinkedIn. And you'll see me at some of the meetings that are coming up, like a MedTech conference that's coming up. So feel free to ask questions, and I'll be spreading the word on behalf of the organization, of course, and we'll have some others out there doing that and other opportunities as well.
Great. That sounds good. And we'll be looking out. So thanks, Keely. I appreciate the conversation
Great.
and I hope to keep up with you.
Yes, thanks so much, David. It was fun. I appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. Your support is valuable and makes us better. Please remember to leave a review and rate Market Pathways on Apple Podcasts or wherever you happen to listen.